Don't ask about the chosen one unless you're ready for your whole reality to shift, because once they enter your mind, nothing ever feels normal again. Now imagine this for a moment, chosen one. You're the quiet storm they pretend not to notice, yet everyone keeps whispering your name behind closed doors like it's some kind of spell they can't break. You walk into a room and the air changes. Not because you say anything, not because you try, but because your energy speaks first. You don't just pass by people, you uncover them. And that's why loving you, asking about you, even just thinking about you, it's dangerous business for those who aren't ready to face themselves. Here's something real that proves it's not just in your head. Studies in psychology show that people feel emotionally exposed in the presence of high awareness individuals. Why? Because deep awareness mirrors back everything they're trying to suppress. You don't need to call it out. You are the mirror. When they look at you, they see not just what they want, but everything they're not. And that breaks their illusion. That's why people are scared of having feelings for you. They know it won't be easy. It's not the butterflies. It's the breakdown. It's not a love story. It's an unraveling. You force people to wake up in their own dream. And for those still clinging to fantasy, that's terrifying. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe. To help spread this light to more souls, it's the responsibility of all of us to keep this message alive. Thank you for being part of this mission. You are part of a force that's shifting the frequency of the world just by being here. Now let's get into it, because this message isn't for everyone, it's for you. Chosen one, you've probably noticed how people get real quiet about you, but never stop asking about you. They may avoid you publicly, act cold or indifferent, but behind the scenes, they're asking their friends, their cousins, their hairdresser's niece, "What's up with you?" They're curious, yes, but it's deeper than that. It's almost like a compulsion. Because the truth is, being drawn to you feels like stepping into fire while pretending it's warm sunlight. At first it feels good, intriguing, addictive, but soon it starts to burn through their ego, their lies, their comfort zone. See, you're not just someone they like, you're someone who shifts them. Their interest in you isn't romantic in the usual way, it's emotional chaos with a magnetic pull. You activate every part of them that's been buried under fear, shame, pride. That's why they start panicking. Because falling for you doesn't mean opening their heart, it means opening their soul. And most people aren't ready for that kind of depth. They think they want the truth, but when you become it, that's when they run. There's this strange thing that happens to people once they've been exposed to your energy. Even if they try to walk away, ignore you, block you, erase you, you linger. Your silence haunts them. Your presence replays in their mind. Not because you were loud, dramatic, or forceful, but because your authenticity left an imprint. You didn't try to impress anyone. You didn't try to belong. You just were. And ironically, that's what made you unforgettable. That's what made them obsessed. Some of them even start to believe there's something off about you. They'll call it intimidating, mysterious, even dangerous. But what they're really feeling is their own inner conflict getting louder in your presence. You're the energy they can't categorize. You don't fit into their neat boxes. You don't bend to expectation. And that challenges everything they've used to feel in control. Let me give you another image. You're like a locked door inside their psyche. And the more they try to figure you out, the more they realize they're the ones holding the wrong key. That's why they ask about you. That's why they talk about you. That's why their feelings feel like a threat. Because you don't just offer connection, you demand transformation. Even the people who swore they weren't interested, who rolled their eyes, who ghosted you like they had the upper hand, they're the ones who secretly replay every word you said. They're the ones checking your socials in silence. Because loving you was never safe. It was never lighthearted. It was never forgettable. It was real. And real is rare and terrifying for people who are still living fake. So if you've ever wondered why you make people nervous, why they act strange around you, why they keep your name in their mouths but avoid eye contact, it's because they're afraid of what they feel. You shake up their world. You dig up buried pieces. You awaken things they spent years trying to keep asleep. And here's the final truth. Chosen one, people don't talk about things that don't move them. They don't obsess over someone they forgot. The fact that you're still the topic of conversation, still the name whispered in curiosity or fear, that alone tells you all you need to know. They feel you. They see you. And no matter how much they try to act like they don't, the damage is already done. This isn't about ego, it's about truth. And the truth is, having feelings for you is dangerous because it forces them to meet themselves. And most of them just aren't ready for that. Not yet. So before we go deeper into why your presence has everyone whispering your name and why catching feelings for you feels more like stepping into a storm than falling in love, pause for a moment. Chosen one. If you've ever felt the weight of being misunderstood, watched, or obsessed over without even trying, this message is for you. Drop a 77 in the comments if you know your energy has people spinning, even when you've said nothing at all. And if this message speaks to you, bless the team behind it with a super thanks, because every little bit helps keep this light flowing through the darkness. Whether it's $1 or a word of gratitude, your support fuels a mission bigger than just us. You're not here by chance. You were pulled to this for a reason. And now let's step into it, layer by layer. If you're truly one of the chosen, you'll feel the pull to stay through every word because deep down, you already know what's coming. Let's get into it. Number one, you were never just a crush. You were the collision they never recovered from. They thought they were catching feelings, but what they really caught was a reflection of their own unhealed soul, and it scared the life out of them. Let's make something clear from the very start. Chosen one, you were never a maybe. You were never someone people just liked. You were the moment they felt the ground shake beneath their emotional comfort zone, and they've been stumbling ever since. You didn't just pass through their life like a fling or a phase. You hit them like truth hits a liar, sudden, sharp, undeniable. They didn't fall in love with you. They fell apart near you, and they've been trying to hold it together ever since. Now imagine this for a moment, chosen one. You walk into someone's life, and they think it's going to be easy, maybe fun, maybe casual, but then, boom, their chest tightens. Their thoughts start racing. The emotional walls they've used for years to protect themselves. You don't tear them down. You walk right through them. And suddenly they're asking questions they've never dared to ask themselves. Why does this person see me so clearly? Why do I feel exposed, not admired? Why am I terrified of what this connection is pulling out of me? Here's a fact they don't want to face, but I'll put it plainly. Falling for you wasn't like falling for anyone else. It wasn't safe. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. It was soul-altering because you didn't come dressed up as validation or surface-level attention. You came as the mirror, and when most people look in that mirror, all they see is the mess they've been hiding. That's why they keep thinking about you long after you've gone silent. That's why they ask around about you, stalk you from fake pages, bring you up in conversations where your name doesn't even belong. It's not love. They're haunted. Haunted by the version of themselves that you forced them to meet. You didn't flirt. You didn't beg. You didn't try. You just existed. And that shook the very identity they were clinging to. You didn't come into their life to be admired. You came to shake the rot out of their foundation. They thought they were ready for someone real, and until real showed up and told them, this version of you can't come with me. That's what your energy says, chosen one. Without even trying, you set the standard. You are the test that reveals who's really ready to grow and who's just performing progress to impress people. Your energy disrupts people who benefit from staying broken. You don't let dysfunction breathe easy. You don't allow spiritual laziness to hide under charm. You don't nurture someone's potential just to be tolerated in return. And that's why being around you doesn't feel like affection. It feels like judgment to those still avoiding their evolution. You walk in love, but that love carries light. And light, it exposes everything. People say they want someone deep, someone real. But when they meet someone like you, who holds their gaze a second too long, who says things that touch the part of them they've never shared with anyone, they freeze. Because deep isn't fun when you're used to swimming in the shallow end of life. Real isn't romantic when it shows you all the fake parts you've been hiding behind. And that's the power you carry, chosen one. You're not just a person. They experience you like a moment of clarity they can't unsee. And once they've tasted that, no matter how far they run, no matter how much they try to replace you, they'll never forget what it felt like to be in the presence of someone whole. Your peace didn't calm them, it challenged them. Your stability didn't comfort them, it exposed their chaos. They'll say things like, "You're intense," "too much," or "hard to read." But those are just defense mechanisms. What they really mean is, "You made me feel seen in a way I wasn't ready for." They'll call it intimidating, but it's really just unfamiliar. They'll say you're hard to love, but what they really mean is, "Loving you requires me to grow, and I don't know if I'm ready to meet myself that deeply." You make them feel behind, spiritually behind, emotionally underdeveloped. They watch how you stand firm in your truth, how you don't beg for attention, how you refuse to shrink just to be digestible. And it messes with them. They realize how much of their worth is tied up in the opinions of others, how often they compromise just to be accepted, how loud their fear really is when they're no longer being distracted by empty praise. And here's the truth they don't have the courage to speak. You were the most expensive soul they ever touched, not because you asked for anything, but because your presence alone demanded an upgrade they weren't ready to make. You came into their life like a glitch in their programming, exposing all the faulty code. And instead of rewriting themselves, they backed out. They didn't pull away because they didn't care. They pulled away because they cared too much and knew deep down they'd have to rise to deserve you. And most people, chosen one, don't want to do the work. They want love without reflection, comfort without correction, intimacy without accountability. But you are never going to give them that. You're not here to babysit brokenness. You're here to awaken what's been buried beneath years of fear and ego. And when they couldn't handle the shift, they tried to label you as the problem. They couldn't control the way you made them feel, so they tried to reduce you to something forgettable, a phase, a crush, a what if. But here's what they're learning the hard way. You don't go away. You echo. You linger. You live in the parts of their spirit that know the truth. And every time they settle for less, every time they pretend to be fine, your name resurfaces like a wave they never learned to ride. So no, you were never just a crush. You were the wake-up call, the soul check, the shift they weren't prepared for, but desperately needed. You didn't ruin them, you revealed them. And in a world full of distractions, that kind of clarity is brutal, but also unforgettable. So let them ask about you. Let them feel the danger of your name. Let your silence teach louder than your presence ever could. Because you, chosen one, are not the end of their story. You're the chapter that forced them to grow up or get out. And the truth? Most ran. But not because you were wrong, because you were right. Too right for the version of them that met you. They'll never forget the day they met their mirror. And you'll never forget that you were never too much. You were just too real for their fantasy. Number two, they knew you before they knew why. And that's what shook them. Some people meet you and think it's coincidence, but their soul knew long before their logic ever caught up. You didn't remind them of someone. They reminded themselves of everything they've been avoiding when they looked at you. Your presence didn't introduce confusion. It introduced memory, buried, ancient, and undeniable. They weren't falling in love. They were falling into recognition, and it terrified the parts of them still pretending to be asleep. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one. You're standing in front of someone you've never spoken to before, and yet their eyes are scanning your soul like it holds answers to questions they didn't even know they were asking. Their body stiffens. Their speech stumbles. Maybe they force a laugh that's just a little too loud. Maybe they go quiet mid-sentence, lost in a storm of emotions that haven't been invited, just triggered. And what causes it? Nothing. You didn't say anything profound. You didn't try to impress. You were just there, fully, powerfully, authentically there. And that alone was enough to awaken something ancient inside them. That's what happens when a soul recognizes something it thought it lost. You didn't feel familiar to them because of some cliche, "You remind me of someone I used to know." Number U felt like something their spirit has been waiting for, something it recognized long before their mind even knew what was happening. That's why they stared a little too long, why their hands trembled slightly, why they left the room needing air, unsure why they suddenly felt like they were falling into something instead of simply meeting someone. See, most people think love begins in the eyes or in the heart, but in your case, it didn't start there. It started somewhere deeper, somewhere formless. Their spirit clocked you before their brain ever did. And when spirit moves first, the body doesn't always know how to follow. That's why the connection felt like both a calm and a storm. Because while one part of them was pulled toward you with gravitational certainty, the other part, their mind, their ego, their fears, was scrambling for logic, for explanation, for safety. And here's where things get messy. Because most people today, they don't live in their spirit. They live in fear, in patterns, in performance. They're attached to surface-level connections. They measure chemistry through checklists, compatibility through convenience. So when someone like you enters the picture, someone who bypasses all of that with just a glance, it short-circuits their system. They don't know what to do with that kind of knowing, that kind of pull, that kind of truth. It confuses them. It scares them. It offends them. Because it reminds them that all the rules they've been taught don't apply when something real shows up. That the connection they thought they'd have to build from scratch was already written inside their bones. You walked into their life like an echo they didn't know they'd been hearing in their sleep. Like a song from a dream they forgot, but instantly remembered when they saw your face. And that's why they can't stop thinking about you, even though they don't understand why. That's why your presence lingers long after you're gone. Why they feel the need to bring up your name in conversations. Why they replay your words over and over again in their head, even if you only spoke for a moment. Because something inside them knows, even if they don't. You ever notice how they act confused, almost annoyed, trying to downplay the vibe? Saying things like, yeah, I don't know, something's just weird about them, or they're just different. That's their fear talking. That's their mind trying to rationalize what their soul already accepted. You walked into their orbit and disrupted their normal. And normal was the prison they'd learned to call home. They'll say it's curiosity, but curiosity fades. Obsession fades. This doesn't. This haunts. This sticks. Because this is what happens when someone meets their soul reflection before they've met themselves. You were the reminder, the spark, the flash of something eternal showing up in the middle of their temporary life, and it shook everything loose. Let me give you another image, chosen one. You're like an old book they didn't know they were still writing. The moment they laid eyes on you, the pages started flipping backward, revealing chapters they'd forgotten, moments they buried, parts of themselves they left behind. And it's disorienting, because now they're sitting there wondering, why does it feel like I've always known them? And the answer is simple, because energy doesn't lie and souls don't forget. That's the danger of being someone unforgettable. You awaken the memory of what's real in people who've been living in fantasy. They didn't choose to feel what they felt when they saw you. Their spirit reacted, and reactions like that, they come from a place far beyond logic. That's why they dream about you, why they can't look you in the eye for too long, why their body language betrays their cool demeanor every single time. Because some part of them has already surrendered, and the rest of them is terrified to catch up. And now they're stuck, watching you from a distance, asking their friends, have you ever felt this with someone before? Trying to name the unnameable, trying to control a connection that was never meant to be tamed. They think it's just a phase, but then they hear your name and feel something in their chest. They see someone who looks like you, and their pulse shifts. They try to date someone else and realize they're chasing a shadow of something they can't explain. They think they're confused, but confusion isn't the problem. It's recognition. Their soul already knows who you are, and until their mind makes peace with that, they'll be stuck in limbo, caught between denying what they feel and craving it every single day. So don't ever think you were imagining it, chosen one. That intense connection, that energy in the room, that shift in their tone, the trembling in their hands, the silence after you left, that was real. It was never about attraction. It was about activation. You activated something dormant, You lit up a part of them they didn't even know was there, and that's why they can't let it go. You weren't just someone they met. You were someone their spirit had been calling for. And now that you've shown up, everything else feels a little too quiet, a little too dull, a little too empty. You didn't just pass through their life, you echoed in their soul, and that's something no amount of logic, distance, or denial will ever erase. Number 3, they can't handle conversations with you because your words hit like warnings. Some people aren't afraid of your silence, they're afraid of what it says about their own noise. There's a reason they pause before speaking to you, why their words stutter, why their energy changes, why they act like they're walking on a tightrope every time you enter the room. It's not intimidation in the surface sense, it's consequence. Because when people speak to you, chosen one, they know deep down that every word might come back to haunt them. Every fake compliment, every half-truth, every carefully rehearsed sentence, they all start to crack under the weight of your presence. You don't speak to impress, you speak to impact, and that scares people who aren't used to being seen. You're not the kind of person someone can have casual small talk with and walk away unchanged. You're the conversation they think about in the car on the way home, the one that replays in their mind at 2 a.m. when the distractions fade and truth creeps in. Even your silence unsettles people, not because it's cold, but because it leaves them with themselves. And for most, that's the scariest company of all. Imagine this. 2 people are standing in a crowded room. One talks and fills the air with empty charm. The other stands silently observing. And yet somehow that silent one commands all the attention. That's you. Your energy alone makes people reflect. Even when you say nothing, you leave people second-guessing everything they said around you. Why? Because you carry weight, not the kind that exhausts, but the kind that exposes. And they feel it, that invisible pressure to be real around you, to drop the masks, to say what they mean or not say anything at all. Most aren't ready for that. They're used to surface-level approval. But you force them inward. And here's the brutal truth. They're not afraid of you. They're afraid of the version of themselves that shows up in your presence. You're the one who makes them stumble through their own contradictions, the one who asks a simple question that ruins a perfectly rehearsed lie. You don't do it with drama. You don't do it with anger. You just exist in a frequency that demands truth, and people either rise to meet it or run from it. So no, chosen one, they can't talk to you like everyone else, because you're not like everyone else. You're the one who turns conversations into clarity, silence into confrontation, and simple words into soul echoes. You're not a vibe, they've had plenty of those. You're the consequence they never saw coming. Number 4, your aura cross-examines their act, and they fold under the spotlight. You didn't ask them to be real. Your presence made pretending impossible. There's no mask thick enough to survive standing in your energy, chosen one. They can fake it for the world. They can perform strength, rehearse confidence, dress up their insecurities in borrowed charm. But the moment they enter your presence, all that illusion starts to tremble. You don't have to say a word. You don't need to ask them a single question. Your energy interrogates what they've been hiding, and it does it silently with precision, like a mirror that only reflects the truth. Imagine this. Someone walks into the room wearing a costume they've worn for years. It worked everywhere else. Everyone bought the act. But then you look at them, not through them, not over them, but into them. And suddenly they can't remember their lines. Their confidence fades into discomfort. Their smile twitches. Why? Because your presence doesn't allow lies to breathe. It suffocates performance. It strips the script down to silence. That's what you do to people who pretend. You walk into their carefully curated world like a spiritual spotlight, and the parts they've buried come crawling out. Not because you force them, but because your authenticity exposes the gap between who they are and who they're pretending to be. And that gap, it becomes unbearable in your presence. You don't chase validation, you don't compete, and that alone terrifies them because their whole life has been a performance for attention, but you're just being, and your being makes their doing look exhausting, fake, unnecessary. You remind them what real feels like, And for someone who's been living in illusion, real feels like a threat. You've probably noticed how their sentences stumble around you, how they hesitate, how they try to impress and then grow awkward when you don't bite. That's their mask slipping. That's their ego shrinking. That's their inner self realizing, I can't lie here. I can't hide here. Loving you isn't about compliments and chemistry. It's about clarity. It's about identity. You don't ask them to change, but being with you would require it. Not because you're demanding, but because your energy doesn't reward falseness. You are truth in human form, and anyone who steps too close is forced to make a decision, evolve or retreat. That's why so many pull back, not because they don't feel you, but because they feel too much when they're around you. And they can't pretend that's normal. They can't pretend you're normal. You're not here to be liked. You're here to shift them, and that shift scares the lies right out of their mouths. Number 5. They asked for a blessing, then fled when it had a backbone. They prayed for real love, then ran from it when it refused to flatter their delusion. Chosen one, let's tell the truth. They asked the universe to send someone genuine, someone real, someone who would love them fully. And then you showed up. Not halfway, not in fragments. You came in whole, honest, awake. And instead of staying grateful, they panicked. Why? Because you weren't the easy version of love they imagined. You weren't here to play along with their comfort zone. You were here to call it out. Imagine this. Someone prays for the rain that will water their growth. But when the storm actually arrives, they run for shelter. That's what happened when they met you. Your presence was the very answer to what their soul had been begging for. But their ego wasn't ready for the cost. Because you didn't show up with flattery and submission. You showed up with standards. You didn't stroke their ego. You confronted their avoidance. And that made them flinch. You were never passive. You never softened yourself to be digestible. And they expected you to. They thought the one they'd been waiting for would let them coast, not challenge their laziness. But you, chosen one, are not comfort food for broken spirits. You are fuel for transformation, and not everyone is ready to burn off their illusions. You speak from the gut. You see through the layers. You call out what others politely ignore. That's not aggression. That's clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable for people who survive on emotional noise. They didn't want truth. They wanted the appearance of love without the responsibility of becoming better. But you don't tolerate half growth. You don't sit quietly while people self-destruct. That's why they called you too much, because they've spent so long being not enough. So when they say it felt like divine timing, they're not lying. It was. But divine timing doesn't mean ease. It means alignment. And alignment requires adjustment. The sad truth is, they weren't ready to be aligned. They were just ready to be entertained. You were the answer they cried for in their darkest hour. But when light came, it was too bright for their sleepy spirit. They wanted change, but not the fire that melts who they used to be. And that's what you brought. Fire, healing, accountability, the real thing. And that chosen one is what separates you from every fantasy they've ever held on to. You are not a soft echo. You are a wake-up call. And those who aren't ready to rise will always mistake your presence for chaos, when in truth it was their illusions collapsing under your truth. Number 6, you're not a trophy. You're a force they can't own. The moment they tried to control you, they realized, you're not the prize at the end of their game. You're the storm that ends it. Chosen one, let's get one thing clear. You are not built to be owned. You're not here to be caged, tamed, or claimed like some lifeless prize that anyone can grab if they play the right game. You're not impressed by the empty tricks or shallow performances that most people rely on to feel powerful. You don't chase attention. You don't beg for a seat at any table. If you're not respected where you stand, you walk. And that alone shakes people to their core. Imagine this for a moment. Someone's used to being the puppeteer, pulling strings, playing mind games, feeding off the insecurities of others. They step into your world thinking they'll do the same. But you cut the strings before they even touch you. You don't react. You don't flinch. You simply exit. And in that moment, they realize just how powerless they truly are when control is no longer an option. You carry yourself with a quiet authority that doesn't need to scream to be heard. People feel it in your silence. They sense it in your energy. You've walked through betrayal and loss, through moments that would have broken others, and instead of shrinking, you learned your worth. You became someone who can't be manipulated because you've already outgrown the cheap tactics that once fooled you. And this is why they fear you. Because mishandling you doesn't just cost them a relationship or connection, it costs them alignment. It costs them the energy shift that your presence brought into their life. When you leave, the atmosphere changes. That flow of peace, that surge of clarity, that invisible favor you carried with you, it all disappears. And they're left in the silence of their own chaos, realizing they fumbled something rare. You're not the type who stays where you're disrespected. You don't fight for a spot in someone's life. You are the spot, the moment of elevation, the energy upgrade they didn't even know they needed. And when they fail to honor that, they don't just lose you. They lose the better version of themselves that only existed when you were near. So no, you're not the type to be possessed. You are the type to be respected. And when they can't rise to that level, they'll keep running into imitations of you, reminders of the fire they mishandled and the presence they couldn't control. Number 7, loving you means leaving the lie, and most aren't ready to let it go. You weren't the threat. They just realized they'd have to break up with their brokenness to hold on to you. Chosen one, your love doesn't feel like the kind they've known. It's not soft enough to be manipulated, and it's not vague enough to hide behind. Your love is precise. It sees straight through the excuses, the performative healing, the I'm trying acts, and that's why it terrifies people who are still in a relationship with their dysfunction. You don't enable survival mode, you expose it. You don't entertain chaos, you hold it accountable. That's not romantic to them. That's revolutionary. And revolutions always come with resistance. Imagine this. Someone spent years decorating their cage. They've gotten used to the pain, the patterns, the power games. Then you walk in, not offering a prettier version of dysfunction, but offering freedom. But freedom to someone who's only known chains feels like danger. And so they hesitate, not because they don't feel you, but because they know they can't take their baggage with them if they want to walk where you're going. Loving you doesn't feel like escape. It feels like confrontation. Your affection demands clarity. Your presence demands self-honesty. You don't even need to say a word. Your energy alone makes people second-guess the habits they used to defend. They can't flirt with toxicity and keep you on the side. They can't straddle healing and sabotage when your standards light up the space like a truth bomb. You don't come wrapped in performance, you come wrapped in purpose. That's why your love doesn't just comfort, it corrects. It says, I'll meet you where you are, but you better not plan to stay there. And that's the fork in the road. Because most people don't want love, they want permission. Permission to stay stuck, to keep repeating patterns and blaming others. But you don't play that role. You don't pacify dysfunction, you interrupt it. You're not cold, you're just clear. And clarity can feel like cruelty to those who've been coddled by chaos. That's why they pull away. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were too right for the version of themselves they're afraid to leave behind. Your love isn't for the weak-willed. It requires someone to unlove their pain, unlearn their excuses, and untie their identity from their trauma. You weren't too much. You were just the one person who wouldn't let them stay half-healed and call it wholeness. And in a world full of people who enable dysfunction and call it loyalty, you're the mirror that demands they evolve or let go. And most, they run. Not because they don't love you, but because they love their old self more. Number 8, you brought light, and it lit up everything they tried to bury. You weren't the storm. They were just terrified when your light revealed the mess they'd made in the dark. Chosen one, let's speak it plain. Your love is not the soft lullaby they were used to. It's not the kind that lets people sleep in their dysfunction and call it peace. Your love illuminates, and light, no matter how beautiful, will always look like a threat to someone who's made a home in the shadows. You didn't show up with judgment. You showed up with truth. But for those who've spent their entire lives hiding from themselves, truth is the most terrifying thing of all. Imagine someone who spent years living in a cluttered house, lights off, pretending it's fine. Then suddenly someone flips the switch. That's what it felt like when you stepped into their life. You didn't point fingers. You didn't criticize. But your presence revealed everything. The habits, the lies, the self-sabotage dressed up as independence. You didn't say a word, but your energy spoke volumes. And what it said was, it's time to clean this up. You made them feel exposed, not in a way that shamed them, but in a way that convicted them. And conviction is uncomfortable when comfort has become their addiction. They weren't prepared for someone like you. They thought love meant being accepted as is, never being questioned, never being shown a mirror. But you were the mirror, and mirrors don't lie. You didn't make them feel small. You made them realize how much of themselves they were hiding. They started to see the games they were playing, the masks they were wearing, the excuses that once felt reasonable now sounded ridiculous. They started noticing how loud their chaos was and how much it had been covering up the silence they feared. Because in that silence, the truth lives, and you live there too. Your love doesn't flatter, it frees, it doesn't stroke egos, it stretches souls. And that's terrifying to anyone who still believes love is supposed to feel like comfort instead of clarity. They wanted warmth without light, affection without awareness, but you didn't come with just warmth. You came with fire, not to destroy, but to refine. And that's why they flinch. That's why they keep one foot in, one foot out. Because being loved by you means facing parts of themselves they've spent years running from. You didn't ask them to change. You simply were the change. And standing next to change without being ready to evolve will always feel like standing next to a threat. But let this be clear. The fear was never about you. It was about what you awakened in them. Because you didn't bring pain. You brought permission to rise, to heal, to stop pretending. And for a person who's built their identity in darkness, even permission can feel like punishment. That's the gift you carry, chosen one. You don't just love people, you liberate them. Even if they run, they won't forget what it felt like to be seen that deeply, to be loved without manipulation, to be held accountable without saying a word. And one day when they finally face those shadows alone, they'll remember who gave them the courage to look. Number 9, they wanted the glow, but not the grind that made it. They weren't drawn to who you are. They were intoxicated by how you make them feel. And that's a big difference. Chosen one, your energy is undeniable. It enters rooms before you do, shifts atmospheres, quiets noise. People don't just see you, they feel you. They're magnetized to something they can't name, like a breeze carrying a scent they've never smelled before, but suddenly can't live without. Your peace soothes their chaos. Your clarity quiets their noise. Your presence offers a strange calm they've never experienced, but quickly crave. But here's the brutal truth. They want the feeling, not the foundation. They want your energy without respecting your evolution. They're drawn to the way you shine, but have no interest in the years it took for you to crawl through darkness to find that light. They want the results of your healing, not the pain that forced you to grow. They want to bathe in the peace you earned, but have no desire to walk through the storms that built it. Imagine someone standing at the edge of a fire, warming their hands, feeling comforted, but terrified to step closer because they know it could burn. That's them. They want your warmth, but fear your fire. They want to consume your energy, not match it. And that's where everything crumbles. They thought they were in love with you, but really, they were addicted to how you made them feel about themselves. It wasn't about depth. It was about relief. You were a spiritual sedative to their dysfunction, a momentary silence in a lifetime of noise. And instead of asking, how can I rise to meet this energy? They clung to it like a drug, hoping proximity would be enough. But you're not a vibe to be absorbed. You're a frequency that must be earned. And that's why they retreated. Because real connection with you requires real work. You don't allow lazy intimacy. You don't carry people who refuse to walk. Being close to you demands they evolve. Because anything less will be rejected by your energy naturally. They say they miss you. But what they really miss is the way they felt when you were near. The calm, the clarity, the elevation. But what they're not telling you is they were never willing to become what that version of them required. They loved your light, but hated what it exposed in them. and so they ran. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were too right for the version of themselves they refused to outgrow. You weren't a detour, you were the destination, but they weren't ready to arrive. And so, chosen one, if you've ever wondered why people are drawn to you but disappear just as fast, it's because you weren't what they expected. You were what their soul needed, not what their ego wanted. You didn't just offer love, you offered evolution. And that kind of presence, it demands transformation. Not everyone's built for that, but you are. If this message lit something inside you, like it always does for the awakened, hit that like button, subscribe to the mission, and drop 77 in the comments to claim your alignment. And don't keep this energy to yourself. Share it forward.